I'm violinist Hristova. I was born in Bulgaria and I started playing the violin at age 6. My first international competition abroad at age 13. And I've been concertizing full time since 2010, first living in Philadelphia. And now my husband and I live in New York. My performance career has taken me around the world playing solo with orchestras, playing world premieres and commissions, as well as the standard repertoire. And I play recitals and chamber music. So I feel very fortunate to have a wide variety of the performances that I do. And I love it. And I love living in New York too.
If you think about breakthrough moments in your career, I'm sure there's moments that you can kind of retrace the steps for our listeners of kind of where you felt things really boomed for you or started to gel professionally.
Yes, I have a very early breakthrough moment, which is slightly humorous, which I would love to share. So, my first breakthrough moment came at age 10 when I was kicked out of my first teacher's violin studio. She was my first teacher and she set me up, and I wanted to apply for a small competition, a local scholarship competition in Bulgaria, or rather my mother wanted me to apply, and she said no. And I wanted to play Tartini's Devil's Trill Sonata, and she said no, it's too difficult for you. And at least I've been told, or I remember that she said, even when you're 20 you won't be able to play it. So I learned the piece by myself with the recording, and I went to the competition and I won it. And another one of her students didn't. So the next day she kicked me out of her class, which happened to be Friday the 13th. So that's my lucky day now. Following that, I started taking the train to Sofia, which is the capital of Bulgaria, and having lessons with a teacher there who then prepared me for this international competition. So it's like one thing led to another. And I came to this country, which my mother knew would need to happen at some point, but that sort of started that process. But more as an adult, I won a competition in New Zealand in 2007. And part of the prize, there's a debut recording, a big cash prize, but the best part of the prize, in my opinion, was the following year. It was a big winners tour where there were orchestra engagements and a recital tour in New Zealand, all across the country. And that tour for me, I see that as the beginning of my performance career. And I sort of pinpoint that moment to the time when I felt ownership of what I was doing. It was for me, no longer for my mother, because it was a huge growth experience. And at the end of the tour, I was really tired, but I wanted to do it all over again. And so I felt like, wow, I can really do this. This is for me. So that's a moment that stands out.
Yeah, I love that. Amazing. If you think about musical influences that shaped your sound and your approach to music, obviously, I'm assuming your sound changed over the years, but maybe kind of where it is currently. What has gone into that particular sound that you currently have?
Yeah, it's a great question. I feel like I grew up around music. Allegedly, I was going to concerts before I was even born. So, as a child, my mother played recordings of David Oistrakh a lot at home, and she also played the music of my father, who was a composer, who I never knew him, but she played his music, and so I feel like I got to know him through his music. So, music was all around me as a child. And of course, I admire the great violinists like Eifert and Oistrakh and Milstein, and there's so many. And what I admire most about them is their individuality and how recognizable their sounds are. And to that end, I actually don't listen to a lot of violin recordings actively because I feel that the brain subconsciously tries to copy. So even if you execute a perfect copy, you're still second best. I find inspiration reading about musicians. I love reading performer biographies and autobiographies and learning about their lives and how they were as people, because of course to us they're these almost mythical figures now, both the performers who are no longer with us and also composers. And reading about them from a human point of view, I find very inspiring. And then also listening to music, like Beethoven's piano works are some of my favorite things to listen to, and I find a lot of meaning in them. So all of that, I feel that it informs my sound. And then through the music, I try to play over and over something that I'm working on and to find answers within the music as to how I feel the composer wanted it, which is something that I love about working with living composers because you can ask them.
Very true. Yes, very good point.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about memorable performances that really stood out? It doesn't have to be your, the biggest crowd or anything, or the fanciest venue, but just something that was meaningful for you on stage.
Some of my most meaningful performances have been at one of the fanciest venues, which is Carnegie Hall, with my teacher, Jamie Laredo, conducting. But a recent performance there stands out as a really special moment, which was last Christmas Eve, so about a year ago. I played Mozart's Sinfonia Concertante there with Milena Pahara-Vanderstadt and Jamie conducting. The Mozart is probably my earliest musical concert memory as a child. I heard it in Bulgaria, in Varna, at a concert that my mother took me to. And I remember just feeling totally enchanted by the piece. And I'd always wanted to play it. It's one of my favorite pieces of music. It's like the perfect piece. And I finally had a chance to, and I played it at Carnegie Hall, and it was on Christmas Eve. And just being able to share that music, it was a perfect moment. It was a really, really special experience.
Yeah, it's so memorable, especially Christmas Eve. I can imagine the vibe was just kind of perfection, probably.
Yeah, it was great.
There's also probably something to be said about when you perform on some sort of holiday-ish day, that the crowd feels that energy in a different way than just like a normal day of the week. Um,
Absolutely.
and I know, especially being in New York myself, I see that vibe of Carnegie around the holidays, that there is this special energy. And so I
Yeah.
can just imagine on Christmas Eve, particularly, everyone was probably really in an excitable mood.
Yeah, and I mean that Mozart, the Sinfonia Concertante really is it's truly such a magical work.
Yeah, and
It just
gorgeous.
makes you smile. You can't help but smile.
Yes, yes. Oh, I love that. Let's talk about your current season. And I know we're recording this in almost end of January right now. Tomorrow's the last
Mhm.
day of January, but so kind of halfway through the season. But tell us some of the highlights, maybe of earlier this season, but then also what you have coming up.
This season has been it started with a couple of very exciting things. The first was a program that I curated and led with the Vermont Symphony. So there was no conductor. I selected the program and I led it, and we were all playing together. It was really exciting. The program included works by Nico Muhly and Florence Price and Bela Bartok, and then also parts of the seasons of Vivaldi and Piazzolla. So this very unique and varied program we brought to many small towns across Vermont. And it's something that I love play lead. I remember the first time I did it, I called my husband and I said, "This is great. I can tell them what to do and they have to do it." And he said, "Oh no." But I felt that there was a really electric energy on stage because there was no conductor. So it was like large scale chamber music. Everybody was really paying attention and reacting and playing off of one another. So that was a really special vibe. That and we played in small towns where actually one of the towns, the stage is in Canada. I think that's Derby Line. Yeah, Derby Line. The audience is in the US. The
Wow.
stage is in Canada.
Oh my God, I don't
It's
think I
on the
ever knew about
border.
this. I mean, I knew that there's some wacky stuff with the border, depending on where people live. I've heard about that, but not a concert
Yeah,
stage,
it's an opera house
an opera house.
that's built on the border.
Huh, that's crazy.
Yeah. So
Interesting. So the audience is sitting in the US and then the stage is in Canada.
yes, we did not have to bring passports though.
Okay. Wow, wacky.
um,
Do we call the name? I wanna look this up later. What's the
it's
name of the
it's
opera
the
house?
I think it's the Haskell Opera House in Derby Line, Vermont.
Okay. Oh,
I mean,
fascinating.
there are signs. I could have walked across to Canada. It says "Don't," but there's no border. It's there are cameras, and it says "Do not cross the border. This is not a legal border crossing." But I saw people doing it. I didn't.
Yeah. Oh my God, crazy.
Yeah. Also around that time, I released my third CD with pianist Michael Houston. This was a French album of sonatas by Poulenc, Fauré, and both Ravel sonatas. So the famous one, and also the one which was published posthumously, which is an early work of Ravel's, an absolutely beautiful work. That was a very exciting CD to release. And upcoming, I have a world premiere by Ellen Tafes Willick, who's writing an unaccompanied piece for me for my project Lineage, which I would love to tell you
Yes,
more
please.
about.
Please
But
do.
yeah, so Lineage is going to see 6 commissions by composers written for me, inspired by the solo works of Bach and Isai. And so you see how violin writing has evolved over 3 centuries. And how I came to that idea is Jamie Loretta, who's my teacher, studied with Joseph Gingold, and Gingold's teacher was Isai. So I studied all the sonatas with Jamie, and I feel like I got sort of a connection to the composer that way. And he told me about how Isai was deeply inspired by the Bach works. And even though his compositions are very technically demanding, he didn't want them to be thought of as showpieces. He felt that they were serious works. And you feel that. And so my idea was I feel this connection, and I love unaccompanied music for violin. I think because the piano is my favorite instrument, makes me feel like I can be a complete instrument too. So I wanted to commission 6 living composers. So Joan Tower was the first who wrote me a piece. Nokutula Ngunyama was the second. Now Ellen is writing me a piece, and there are 3 more to be announced. And then eventually that will become a recording.
Wow. Oh, I love that. How fascinating.
I'm really thrilled. Yeah,
And
and I'm so honored to have Ellen writing me a piece. I love her writing, and she's a fabulous composer and violinist, so she understands the instrument, writes well for it.
and
So
so
I'm really
to
excited.
for sure. And so it's this journey of how the violin has changed, you're saying, over the years.
Yes, how solo violin writing has evolved. Though you look at the Bach chaconne, and that's like that was already all there. It has, to me, every human emotion that you can have in just that piece. And that's maybe one of my favorite. I think that's my desert island piece. If I had to choose one piece to practice for the rest of my life, it would be the Bach chaconne. There's so much information every time we play it.
Hmm.
Learn something new.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you see how violin writing has evolved, and what we can do on the instrument has really increased, and people's imaginations
Hmm.
expand that.
If you had to pinpoint, I mean, especially because you're probably deep in working on this project right now, what are some of the key takeaways or insight that you have from the evolution of violin writing?
Of course, as the instrument has become modernized, there is literally more space. So you on the fingerboard and the extended techniques. So there's more that's demanded of us. But I say to the composers, loosely inspired by Bach and Isai. So I don't press the point, I just give the information. So some people have taken that into consideration more than others. And I think the techniques that are available to composers now, there are just more of them. But sometimes they still revert back to arpeggios and lines and like Bach like writing, which is so deep.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So
Oh,
it's nice to see
fascinating.
the variety.
Right, right. Do you have any kind of estimated release date for all of this? For the
No release date, but I really want to ramp it up. So I think within the next year I'll have the other 3, and then shortly after that we'll make the recording.
Awesome. So potentially like end of 2026, potentially, or like somewhere
Yeah,
in
yeah.
26. Yeah. Got
And
it.
actually, the program around this project is very modular because I like to include a Bach and an Isai, but also there are so many other works for solo violin. So you include a Bach and an Isai, 1 or 2 of these pieces, and you can either have a 1-hour program or a full length program with intermission. There's a lot that can be done.
Yes. Oh, fascinating. Let's take a quick break. If you're a classical musician, you know that talent alone is not enough to be seen and heard in today's marketplace. You need visibility. Over the past 15 years, I've worked as a brand strategist in classical music, working with artists and organizations, building that visibility for them. I've helped artists win Grammy Awards and nominations, such as Jesse Montgomery and the Miró Quartet, and I've helped Yoon Chan Lim achieve global stardom through my work at the Cliburn. If you're a classical musician looking for that visibility to propel you forward, to attain better engagement, reach out because I'd love to explore working with you. Simply tap the link below to explore more and schedule a time to speak with me. Now, back to the conversation. Let's talk about learning a new piece. I'm curious how you go about approaching this. And actually, it's a good tie into what we just were talking about with these new commissions, because these are then brand new and you have to, absorb them. So how do you go about that?
If it's a new work, I don't have a recording that I can hear. But if it's not a new work, I still try not to listen to a recording. I have nothing against recordings, but I try not to use them as part of the learning process when it's somebody else's recording. I record myself and play that back, and that's an incredible learning tool. What I do is I start just slowly going through the piece. Usually I have a moment of panic And then I go back to the beginning and start finding technical solutions first and then musical solutions. I find that the musical solutions come from just playing the piece over and over, and actually solving some of the technical problems leads to musical discoveries. Then I can ask the composers. If it's a new work, you can talk to composers and you can workshop the piece with them. And that's something I've loved about having these pieces written for me, that I can go and say, how about this? Or what are you thinking there? I also find solutions away from the violin. So I've become a distance runner just as of the last year or so. I've done a half marathon. I'm doing two more this year. So part of that involves a lot of training, right? And I don't listen to music. I just go with my thoughts. And I have found solutions for violin problems away from the violin while running or walking. And I think it's our brains are always working, and it's sometimes healthy to step away from the instrument and have that moment of reflection. And then a few years ago, I was learning the Wynton Marsalis violin concerto, and that's a mammoth piece. It's a magnificent piece, but for that, I knew I really needed a lot of time, as much time as I could get. So I got the music about a year before I first had to play it, and I started again working through it with my process. But then I was able to play for Wynton, and that was so inspiring. He went through the whole piece with me, showing me all the different influences that he had when writing the piece, different styles of jazz and blues, and just he played me YouTube videos like, this is this person and that's what I had in mind, this is this person. It was so inspiring. So I feel that that really enriched my approach to that piece. So yeah, communication, I guess, thought and communication.
Yeah. Backtracking a little bit about being a long distance runner and kind of finding that creativity, do you find that just from your experience and as well as talking to your colleagues who are artists, that by removing yourself from kind of the practice room or from the instrument, you're able to have those kind of breakthrough moments of inspiration and creativity? Do you find that? I mean, it sounds like that's what you're saying yourself, but do you also find that when you talk to your colleagues?
Absolutely. And like, I have a very close friend who does yoga, and actually Menuhin did yoga, and he talks about the holistic approach and using technique for the music, but also stepping away from the instrument. We're complete human beings. We're not machines. I feel that that all goes into the performance. And absolutely, I feel like when you step away from the instrument, the brain can work in different ways.
Yeah. Well, it's like the Beethoven walks that he would do, the
Yeah,
famous walks
absolutely.
kind of thing.
In nature, like,
Yeah.
he found peace in nature, and nature is rejuvenating.
Yeah, yeah. No, I definitely sense that. Not because I'm a performing artist, but just because even anyone sitting at a computer all day, you need to
Yeah,
get up
yeah.
and get a break, and get that kind of a new perspective. So I think it's a very thread across humanity, but it's especially interesting, I think, for artists. I
Yeah,
find
it
them.
also does wonders for the mood. For my mood, I find that running has really helped with a lot of anxieties that I have with my mood. It's the first physical thing that I found that, well, I look forward to, for one, but also if I'm feeling sort of overwhelmed with work or practice, it feels like a release rather than one more thing to do. I'll say, oh, I'll go for a run. And then I feel, but you never regret going for a
Yeah,
run, or I
right.
never regret going for a run. I always feel better and more clear headed and sort of ready to get back into whatever I was struggling with.
Yeah, yeah, so true. If we think about your long-term career goals slash legacy and how you envision your music making, making an impact on people, et cetera, are there particular kind of milestones you're thinking about that then becomes your legacy, or how are you kind of thinking about that whole future?
Yeah, well, I'm still in my 30s, so my legacy sounds very intimidating, and it's not something I've thought about too much, but I would love to do more commissioning. That's something that I feel very passionate about, and creating new and interesting projects, maybe pairing old works with new works, which is sort of what I'm doing, but building on that. Then I would want to be known for the quality of my playing and always commitment to the music, because that's very important to me, and also authenticity to who I am. I feel like that's another really important quality, and audiences can tell if what you are doing is not fully authentic or you're not fully committed. So I feel that it's very important to have that commitment to the music and to authenticity. So all those things,
Got it.
absolutely.
I'm curious. I know, and not all artists feel this way, but some artists, like the Yo-Yo Ma's of the world, go out and kind of broker peace in a way. They're kind of going out and have a particular vision in addition to just performing on stage like other artists. Other artists, are creating festivals, and kind of complete nonprofits, and going
Yeah.
out and do that in addition to whatever. Do you kind of want to do any of that, or are you just focused really on kind of the concert and recording experience?
I would love to do that kind of. I find that incredibly inspiring, and I see it on a smaller scale with audience members. I feel that if I connect with somebody after a performance and they say you brought joy to my day, or this performance moved me, I feel like that's a really meaningful compliment. Menuhin also actually did a lot of humanitarian work, which I didn't know about until I read one of his autobiographies, and that's all really moving. I would
Mm,
find a lot of meaning in that. I have not done much of that so far, but I have done some. I've played in hospitals, and
mhm,
I played in a prison once, and that was incredibly moving
mm.
just to be there.
Yeah, it brings to mind, Joyce DiDonato does work with, Sing Sing, I believe, in
Hmm.
upstate New York,
Yeah.
if I recall correctly. And then another singer that's doing something interesting, is Renee Fleming with Music in the Brain,
Hmm.
which is
I'm not
fascinating.
familiar with that one.
Yeah, yeah, she really, so I guess after she, I mean, she's still performing, but she's not like at the Met, and she kind of quasi-retired, I guess, from the Met, et cetera.
Hmm.
And now she's focused on this kind of not passion project. I mean, it's like a real important connection between music and the brain. And I believe she's written a book or co-authored a book. I
Oh,
haven't
I'd
read
love
it.
to read it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
haven't read it myself, but I've heard about it and it sounds really fascinating. And it's like her new kind of focus. So instead of just, as she was known for, decades as this, fabulous soprano, she's kind of shifted into this music and the brain. And I think it's really fascinating. So it's just,
Yeah.
just an example of like this idea of legacy and how an artist at such a high level, years later when they're, quasi-retired and how
Hmm.
they're kind of going in this, very impactful direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I will look for that, but because I love to read, and as I said, I find a lot of inspiration in musician biographies and writings.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you and me
Yeah.
both. We need to put this on our book list.
Yes.
I've known about this book, and I need, and I forget what it's called, but yeah, it's something about music in the brain.
Okay. I think
Uh,
Music in the Brain is an Oliver Sacks. I mean, besides Musicophilia, I feel like Music in the Brain is the title of another book, but maybe it's also the title of this book.
no, I believe it's Music and Mind: Harnessing the Arts for Health and Wellness is the
Oh
name of
wow.
the book. Yeah, it says it was edited by Renee Fleming. So I feel like she had partnered with someone
Oh,
else,
maybe a physician or a scientist
I believe.
of some
Yeah.
kind.
Anyway, I won't take more time on this, but yeah, that's the name of the. So anyone listening to the podcast and they want to go Google this, yes, it's Music and Mind: Harnessing the Arts for
Sick
Health
in
and
mind.
Wellness.
Great.
Cool. Anyway, that was a little side tangent.
It's
Um,
good.
coming back to my questions though, which actually brings us to the quick fire round. So this is the short answers. So don't feel like you have to give a long-winded answer.
Okay.
What's one talent you have that would surprise our listeners?
I recently learned how to whistle, and not only whistle, but whistle while playing because a George Crumb piece asked for that, and whistle on pitch and in rhythm with myself. I was very proud of that. I watched a lot of YouTube tutorials.
I'm impressed. If you could collaborate with any artist, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Well, I have two. One of them is Beethoven because he's my favorite composer, though I think he would have been difficult to collaborate with. But more seriously, my father, who was also a composer, he was not somebody that I knew. And he passed away when I was very young. So I would love to have had a chance to collaborate with him.
If you weren't a musician, what other profession do you think you'd pursue?
I'd love to be a pilot.
Ah, what's the first thing you do in the morning that helps set the tone for your day?
I love waking up early and feeling like I have space and time to have my coffee. And I do the Wordle, and almost immediately, our orange cat Frankie jumps into my lap. So, not feeling rushed in the morning really sets me up for a good day. So, that's why I like waking up early and having my coffee.
Yes, agreed. I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
Last question. What does success mean to you?
finding fulfillment in what one does and touching people's lives and making an impact through what they do. And if somebody's lucky enough to have that be their livelihood, to me, that's a great definition of success.